Welcome to PCOM Perspectives, where we discuss news, events, research, and other topics impacting our campuses and communities. Join us as we share our PCOM perspectives. Hello, and thank you for joining us. I'm your host, Dr. Jay Feldstein, and today I'm joined by Dr. Robert Bassett, an associate professor in PCOM's Department of Emergency Medicine. Dr. Bassett is a PCOM graduate who earned his Doctor of Osteopathic Medicine in 2006. He served as an active duty medical officer in the United States Army from 2009 to 2013 and is currently a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army Reserves. Dr. Bassett has seen his share of combat zones, most recently training medics in Syria in 2021 and completing a tour in Iraq as part of Operation Iraqi Freedom. He has received several Army Commendation Medals and serves as an example of the long-standing tradition of military service among osteopathic physicians. Today, Dr. Bassett and I will discuss his extensive military background, how his knowledge of osteopathic medicine shaped his career in the uniformed services, and why so many DOs serve our country. Welcome, Rob.
Jay, thank you for having me.
Oh, well, thank you for being here. It's really a pleasure. So I got a couple questions for you. So first, let's talk about your journey to studying osteopathic medicine while in the Army Reserves. What inspired you to pursue a DO and to use it to pursue military medicine?
Well, this may be controversial, but let me be transparent. When I was in undergrad, I grew up from an undergrad standpoint. I was up in Boston, and this is truly like what I would consider the last bastion of allopathic medicine. So when I was going to my pre-med advisors, there was no like, hey, you really should consider osteopathic medicine. It was allopathic or bust. So when I first applied to medical school, I wasn't committed to the osteopathic path. And then it's funny, after I got here, I had so many classmates who were like, I came from a long line of DOs. This has always been in my blood. I was always I got into every medical school I applied to, but I decided to come to PCOM because that's where my lineage was. And that wasn't me. Honestly, I went to the best medical school that I got into. And after I got here is when I really started to see the light and see the value of osteopathy, particularly when it came to, my role as a military physician.
And how did being a DO impact the way you approach the treatment and training of your fellow soldiers?
So, it's kind of interesting. I think, I recognized early on when I got here, I'd already taken the military scholarship before I showed up on campus. And this was, in my blood, so to speak. And when I got here, that's when I started to really appreciate, kind of PCOM's lineage too. And, General Blank being the first Surgeon General of the Army, that was an osteopath. And being told really early on that, we were one of the largest producers of military physicians apart from the Uniformed Services University. And we had this long, kind of history. And because of that footprint, I had an amazing network of connection of DOs that were in the military and getting a sense of early on, how their careers were different because of their osteopathic influence. And I adopted most of those principles very quickly. I think the reality was there's some very, very unique aspects of military medicine, not the least of which is recognizing that, the cost benefit equation for certain therapies changes when you're in an austere environment, especially when you're dealing with people who are operators that can't necessarily take the day off. A pilot's going on a bombing mission and you're like, oh, well, let's just give you some medicine that might be sedating, but, take the night off. It doesn't work that way. So having an opportunity to provide therapies that don't have the same side effect profile, and a classic one is some of the sedating or other adverse side effect profiles of certain medications, made it an unbelievable advantage when compared to allopathic practitioners.
So did you use a lot of OMM?
So I will say this in full disclosure, that I have learned to appreciate that osteopathic manipulative medicine is its truly own subspecialty. And just by coming to 4 years of undergraduate medical education and getting the amazing OMM training that we get, I still tip my hat to people who are residency trained in OMM because of how hard that is. There are, as an emergency doc, I would say there are still things that we do from a manipulative medicine standpoint, and even our allopathic brethren can recognize that things like a certain vagal maneuvers, carotid sinus massage is manipulating somebody with your hands, that there's a lot of therapies that are advantageous. There's a lot of musculoskeletal things that I think, we used fairly routinely for sure. And one thing I will say is I was embarrassed to recognize how in demand having a high OMM skill set was, even among allopathic physicians. There were people that were always come up, especially in a deployed zone, and they're like, "Oh, you're a DO? I need your help with this manipulation." And if you weren't prepared and proficient in that skill set when you got there, just because of the high demand, your skills were even better before you left.
Were you in ROTC in college?
I wasn't. No, no. I actually, my fraternity was the basketball team.
Okay.
But yeah, no, I didn't do ROTC, but I will say this, I came from a long line of military. Unknown secret about me, I'm going to reveal it here today that a lot of my PCOM colleagues don't recognize, is I was adopted. So my parents were my dad was a West Point guy. His dad was a West Point guy. They were stationed in Germany. They were told they couldn't have kids. They put him for adoption, and needless to say, they hit the lottery. And
Well, they sure did.
yeah, thank you. But it was actually the great irony of this is, so my parents who adopted me, my family as I know it, both sides had this huge military lineage back to World War II and even before that. But interestingly, most recently, my wife, who's actually a proud PCOM grad of class of 2007, got me a membership to, I think it was 23andMe or like Ancestry, and one of those things. And so I found out some lineage. Long story short is I met some blood relatives and found out that on that side of my genetic family, there was a long line of Army people there as well. So it truly was.
So it's genetic for you.
It really was. It was, metaphorically and literally in my blood.
Well, that's a fascinating story. So you mentioned before that PCOM provided a unique role during your deployment in Syria. Tell us more a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think this is one of the things I'm most proud about, because the truth is I knew that there was pedigree there because of people that had come before who had served in the military, and I was proud to be joining those ranks. And it's such a fun sort of small elite club to be a part of. One, to be in osteopathic medicine. Two, to be in military medicine, but then to be in osteopathic military physicians even smaller, and then PCOM grad in there is even smaller. And it's really, really neat to see that small network and how long people have come from the PCOM ranks to serve. And when I first went to Iraq, I had been out of the Philadelphia area for a while. I did residency in Indiana, and then my duty station was in Fort Polk, Louisiana. But I hadn't been back in Philadelphia in many, many years. But after we moved back, because my wife told me after we got off active duty, I was now from Philadelphia, and we moved back proudly. I was able to rejoin faculty member in the Department of Emergency Medicine. And then during my next assignment, once I got tagged for a new deployment, I knew that there was going to be a big part of an opportunity to do training both with our own personnel, but also with our partner forces. And I reached out to the Department of Emergency Medicine, and Bob Sklar and the rest of the people up there were bent over backwards to lend out training materials and like robust stuff, everything from, intraosseous needles to high fidelity LifePak 10 or 12 simulation with an iPad that we could really duplicate high fidelity sort of critical resuscitation scenarios. And I was able to ship that all over prior to us leaving to a tent in Syria.
That's cool.
It was amazing. And we got to train a lot of the Syrian Democratic Force medics that were partner forces with us on PCOM equipment. It was a really special privilege to do that.
Fascinating, really. So lastly, what is a professional goal you hope to achieve in the next year?
Oh God, there's so many.
Pick three.
Yeah, I know. It's funny, and we were talking about this before we turned the mic on about our background as emergency physicians and how hard the practice of medicine has evolved, and that specialty in particular, and resiliency strategies. And one of the things that's really helped to fill my cup and keep me rejuvenated has been teaching on campus. And for as much as I love educating residents and fellows, for all of those of you who are listening to this, it's still a special privilege. But one thing is clear, that coming back and working with first and second years who have not been in the clinical environment, their level of of enthusiasm and idealism is infectious. And getting an opportunity to be around them has been so rejuvenating for me. It's been really, really special and really changed a little bit of my outlook on how I want to spend my professional time. So I'm proud to announce, actually, by the time this gets published, I think a lot of people will know about this, a new sort of passion project of mine, which is piloting a sort of group coaching, group mentoring program to help students choose wisely when it comes to what's out there from the medical specialty buffet. We know that for the longest time, actually forever, we've really been teaching that you can't choose your specialty based on what you learn in the classroom. You have to go and experience that specialty. And I think that's a half truth. Like, the reality is you don't know what it's like to catch a baby until you catch a baby. But conversely, when you get out into the medical, into the rotations and the clinical rotations in third year, very, very quickly, state of the art is that you have to apply for audition rotations by April. And they have 6 or 8 months, the average third year medical student, to make a choice. And unfortunately, that's not enough time to get an adequate sampling, and people feel pressured, and that's been the response that we've gotten, the feedback we've gotten from not just PCOM students, but across the board. I work at Uniformed Services University. That's my faculty assignment in the military. And it's the same kind of thing, where there's this intense pressure to decide. And we know a measurable percentage of people will end up choosing a different specialty, or worse, stay in a specialty that they prematurely chose because it's just so many barriers to switching. So my goal is to introduce people in a meaningful way, a very creative, paradigm shifting way to the specialties in the first and second year. And right now we're taking a cohort of students through and, trying to collect some data and some responses. And I'm really hoping to change the way we do business and subsequently change the world.
All right. Can't wait to see those results, and hopefully you'll be able to publish on it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I'm sure you got a couple of questions for me.
Oh boy, do I. Yes. So I think in addition to the usual stuff, like how do you mentor me to become a university president, or to look so amazing on a daily basis? I'll start with more typical questions. So getting back to the military stuff, Jay, as we talked about, PCOM has a long history of DO graduates who have served in the U.S. military. Is there anything in particular that you think that you can attribute that legacy to?
I think it actually has to do more with the osteopathic profession in general. In fact, the military really opened up the world for DOs. I mean, DOs, were still fighting the second-class citizen battle till the Korean War.
Yeah.
And then all the MDs got drafted and went to Korea, and there was nobody here to take care of patients at home. And plus, they were running out of manpower. So the military kind of put DOs on equal footing with the allopathic world. So that was a major step in our overall acceptance to the medical profession. And I think people just gravitated to that. That's number one. Number two, financial. The military's offered scholarship trainings for tuition. And the third thing is, when you think about it, early, in the late 50s, early 60s, there weren't a lot of residencies open to DOs besides DO hospitals. So there were very few, especially in surgery. Well, you could do surgical residencies in the military. So I think that attracted another subset because you could do, at the military hospitals. So it was kind of this natural gravitation towards the military from an acceptance standpoint. And we have a disproportionate number of military physicians compared to a ratio of, allopaths out there. And we have a lot in leadership positions as well. And I think it's a tradition that's continued. Now, I've noticed a drop off. Been here 10 years, maybe in graduation, it'd be about 20. We're kind of down in the, single digits to low double digits right now across all the campuses. And I don't know why that is.
Single digits
above
people
military,
yeah.
For pinning ceremonies and
Right.
so forth and so on. But there is a long tradition. I mean, the both, presidential physicians, Trump's with Shane Conlon, PCOM grad, and now the NICOM grad is President Biden's physician. So
I don't know if you know this. Sean was one of my classmates.
Oh,
too.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't know that.
I take special pride in that as well.
Yeah,
that's a good point. I think there's a lot of influences, unfortunately, that are making the decision about joining the military evolved, not just specific to osteopaths, I guess. All right. Well, listen, I will say this as an ER guy, I'm constantly in a situation to be the sort of faculty mentor to people coming behind me. But one thing I don't always get an opportunity to do is to talk to people who've come before me. You and I both share that specialty of emergency medicine. I would love to hear your perspective on sort of how the specialty has evolved and, what you think future trends in emergency medicine are.
It's an interesting question. So I'll be the first to admit it, and I've admitted this on several other podcasts and when I talk to students that that was an emergency medicine burnout. I worked at a level 1 trauma center for 10 years and I just burned out. I mean, I don't have to tell you the shift work. We constantly change shifts and the level of intensity. Tell people it's, you're kind of like the professional athlete of the medicine world. It's a young man's game.
Yeah.
And at that time, you were really limited on what you could do. You could do an EMS fellowship, you could do a toxicology fellowship, and that's about it. But the world has changed. I mean, ER docs can do intensivist fellowships, they can do ultrasound, they can do diving medicine. There's lots of other options out there.
Yep.
Sports medicine now is open to get boarded in as well.
Care,
all of those.
Yep.
So there's a lot more options. What I tell students, and for a while they all wanted to be emergency medicine physicians, that was like one of the most number one match specialties. Yeah. And then COVID hit and changed everything. Changed the nature of the workforce. A lot of hospitals shut down. ER doctors couldn't find jobs, and I think that's starting to come back. But I would always tell them, listen, if it were me, I would do a dual residency. I would do EM-IM, I would do EMFP, I would do EM-PEDS, because if and when you burn out, you can shift easily into an outpatient setting in one of those fields. And I still would give that advice today. And basically, with the nature of healthcare, consolidation, the lack of primary care, once again, ERs are getting swamped. I just read an article the other day that the volumes are up nationwide. There's not enough primary care physicians, or there's not enough taking new patients. And, in an immediacy, we're always going to have urgent care, which I call the retirement village for burnout ER physicians. That's available now. You get put out the pasture, in a low intensity setting. But there's always going to be a role for emergency medicine. And it is the entry point into the hospital system. And it's basically going to become, I think, they're going to be ICUs, because so much is done outpatient now. So the sickest of the sick are going to end up in the ER. So it's going to be an entry point ICU.
Let alone the boarding. Like they're already doing.
And the whole micro hospital. Where you have an ER and 10 holding beds. Well, who do you think is going to staff that? It's going to be ER docs. So I think we are always going to have emergency medicine. And I tell people all the time, if I had to do it all over again, even though I burned out, I would do it the exact same way.
You would?
Yeah, because it was great training. I loved it. It fit my ADHD. I was an adrenaline junkie, like we all are. And any ER doc who says they're not's a liar.
Right. That's probably true.
And it was great. And I would do it the exact same way. I don't know, my ER chief, the guy who ran our ER group, he didn't believe in burnout. He believed in bore out. After your 100,000th patient and your 10,000 MI, it's like, okay, what's next? And I said, well, after your adrenals have been squeezed for 10 years, there's not a whole lot left. And it's like you go from, this is routine to uh-oh. And those uh-ohs didn't feel really good.
No, I agree. Yeah, I don't think it's boredom. I think it's our value system changes. Our risk tolerance changes as we age. Yeah, I think that's true. It's really interesting you said that too, because I've always sort of thought like, oh gosh, the extra training up front, if you do a combined residency and then you only practice one specialty, you're delaying getting to an attending level. And you may have sort of not wasted, but sacrificed all that extra time to develop a skill set that you're not going to use. But in my later years, one thing I realized, to your point, is one of the best ways to inoculate against not having a way to earn because you can't practice your primary specialty anymore is to have that ability to pivot. And nobody's going to want to go back later in life to retrain. and do another residency. So to your point, there may be some real value.
You know, I know additional 2 years seems like a lot at the
Yeah.
time because for college and medical school
Yeah.
and residency, but in the grand scheme of life,
Yes.
it's not that much longer. But the one thing I will say is emergency medicine is great training for leadership
Yeah, that's
and
so true.
physician leadership, whether it be hospital medicine or your ER group, in the insurance world, whatever it is, because you're used to working in teams,
hmm
you're used to multitasking, you're triage all the time, what's important, what's
Yeah.
not important. You're good at making decisions without all the information. So you really do, and you work across every medical specialty
Yeah.
and every member of the healthcare team in a hospital. So it really is good training for leadership.
Yeah. And by definition, as an ER guy, you build relationships in units
It's
of
all about-
seconds,
right.
minutes. And
Yeah.
you can do that as a social chameleon for sure. That's true. It's great pedigree for leadership.
And it's about, it's how do you get somebody at 2 o'clock in the morning doesn't want to come into the hospital to see their patient, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we've all been there.
The art of the difficult
right.
consultant.
It's all about relationships.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a great point. Well, if I can pick your brain on one more thing that's near and
Okay.
dear to my heart as
All
a
right.
military doc, one of my roles here is as the faculty advisor for the Student Association of Military Osteopathic Physicians and Surgeons. Very, very special privilege to be in that role. And to your point, I take I love all of our students. I love all of my students, but there's a very special place in my heart to the people who continue in that tradition. And I think recognizing what you just said is true, that as the population that decides to go into military medicine gets smaller and smaller, I think our ability to take care of that group and provide for that group is increasingly important. As the leader of the ship, by the way, if I haven't taken an opportunity to say thank you for all that you do for us yet, let me do that. But as the leader of the ship,
and thank you for your service.
Feels like a vice presidential debate in here,
right?
Civil and congratulatory. But yeah, no, I really do appreciate your stewardship and your leadership, and I would love to get a sneak peek on maybe sort of future strategic planning on how we can expand our services and help to kind of cultivate that sort of pro-military, military-friendly curriculum and services.
I was actually, I was thinking about this, and I think unfortunately, as tuition increases, I think you may have more people starting to go for military scholarships to pay for their medical education.
Yeah.
That's number one. And I think outreach to feeder schools in college, the undergraduate programs, the pre-med advisors, making them aware of the military options and how great the training and the experience is. Visiting the ROTC programs is another way. And I'm quite frank, I don't know if we do that. And, that's a way to do that. And also, we have a lot of outreach programs and, pathway programs for high school students. And we could introduce the whole military medicine aspect to them at an earlier age.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, I think they're without a doubt.
It's building kind of the funnel to make more people aware of military medicine and the options available to medical students that go that route.
Yeah, I mean, people do start worrying about how they're going to pay for it well before they get here.
Right.
It's true. Yeah, it's funny, the dynamics, because you see more and more of some of these allopathic schools that are now had this amazing sort of endowments that can pay, I think was it Mount Sinai in New York?
Yeah, $1 billion in medical education is free.
Yeah. So I've always worried that was going to put more pressure on the military, because all of a sudden the scholarship doesn't seem that appealing if all of a sudden more and more medical universities are saying, hey, you can come here for free. But in the same breath, I think we all have said that the people who sign up for the scholarship just for the finances are never happy.
Right.
It's the people that have that commitment to serve and that always look back. And that, honestly, I would say, without exception, that's been my experience with our PCOM students. The people who do it aren't just doing it for the money.
They're committed to it. They have a lineage as well. See, a lot of the pinnings are done by relatives.
Yeah.
Which is really, it's a great thing.
I agree.
No, it really is. Well, Rob, I want to thank you for joining us today, and thank you for your service again to our country and to our school. And today there are over 2,000 doctors of osteopathic medicine meeting the United States military and medical needs throughout the world. And PCOM is proud to teach the next generation of DOs will follow the same vocation to service and follow in your footsteps. I'm Dr. Jay Feldstein, and this has been PCOM Perspectives. You can listen to PCOM Perspectives on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. Until our next episode, remember, as you navigate the fascinating worlds of medicine and higher education, shifting your outlook can be the key to unlocking new insights and better patient care. Stay curious, stay open, and keep a healthy perspective.